the Game of the Year award I've always found to be very subjective, and I'm not talking about the game choice. Obviously that's subjective to everyone, it's your personal opinion. Rather, what is allowed to be considered a Game of the Year. Something I have always found off-putting are those who discount people who consider games that weren't released in the same year for their Game of the Year consideration. I get what they mean, they want a contest for only the games of that year. But to me, each year is a story that is wrapped up in a little bow by the end. Not each year is pretty, of course. Some are filled with more strife than others. I'm looking at you, 2020. But that is your story in the end. And the Game of the Year is the one that helped define that year for you. It left that much more of an impact on you than every other game you played. Why should someone choose Tears of the Kingdom over Elden Ring for their 2023 Game of the Year if they played both in the same year and enjoyed Elden Ring more? So many people I know have gone on afterwards to be influenced to play the rest of the Souls franchise by this one game just because their perspective of games as a medium shifted because of Elden Ring. And I don't even like the Souls games much, but I can respect the love and passion that was put into them. However, I do get why people categorize Game of the Year to literal games that released that year, as it makes it into a competition with limited entries rather than an infinite amount. It's fun, you know, with the competition aspect, and allows for more discussion to take place of why your favorite game is better than their favorite. As such, with this video, I'll lay out every game I played this year and give my Game of the Year for both games that released this year, and my overall Game of the Year open to any game I played this year. The big one. They may be the same game for both awards. They may be different. 2023 was quite possibly the strongest year for games I have played, and so it did make it quite difficult to choose. But first, the nominees I will list in order of which I played them this year. Here we go! Sonic Origins was the first game I beat this year, not the whole collection of course. I beat Sonic 1 and 2 first, and then beat 3 and Knuckles and CD a little bit afterwards. But I'll just talk about it all here because, you know, I'm not going to talk about them out of order because that just feels weird. Anyways, this was the first time I actually beat any of the classic Sonic games, and I really did enjoy my time with them. I love the addition of the bonus content and cutscenes that help bridge together each game. There's a fun mission mode that you can mess around with. I mean, even though if I don't actually partake in that content as much as I probably would want to, because I just don't have the time, it's really cool to see the effort that's just put into that kind of stuff. When this game came out, it got bombed in reviews for being super glitchy and having missed content such as the music missing in Sonic 3. I also did grab it on sale for a little bit, but I don't know, I really did enjoy my time with this. The additions made to each of the games I thought actually really helped out. The coin system they had rather than a life system made it so that you can try a ton on the mini games if you needed to. There isn't a game over screen forcing you back to square one. That would have sucked, for Sonic 2 especially. I maybe really enjoy these Sonic games for what they are rather than being super archaic. I would have never been able to finish any of these Sonic games without the save state feature or the coins they implemented here instead. But the games themselves, I mean, Sonic 1, it has not aged very well in general. Just the level design just doesn't allow you to go fast. Thank you, Marble Zone. Sonic 2 is my personal favorite because I grew up with it, but I never actually got past Chemical Plant Zone because as a kid, who is getting past Chemical Plant Zone? Still though, getting past that, there's a ton of iconic parts of that game, except for the Metal Sonic fight at the end, that can go burn. Sonic CD I played after that, and I mean, that one has some really high highs with just the design of everything and the soundtrack. And just the fluidity. You really do feel like you're going fast in that game. Too fast, the fact that you're going to the future and the past. It's really, really neat. Problem, it just feels very empty. I feel like there could be a lot more going on. It's like missing a giant section, it feels like, to these levels. Maybe it was just too expansive, but, you know, it was still pretty solid. I mean, I'd replay if I had the chance, but it was just, it could have been better. But in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, I mean, that's probably all-around the best one. I felt like they had a lot more creative leeway in that one, and so they really, really went all out. Especially, you could tell in the first act, where they just burned the whole forest down, because why not? But I still am biased. I'm going with Sonic 2 as my favorite. But in the end, really great time altogether. I'd highly suggest it, especially if it's on sale, which is 90% of the time these days. So yeah, get Sonic Origins if you can. Really excellent time. And this isn't the last time you're going to hear Sonic. It's going to be on here quite a bit more. In the first 4 weeks, I want to say, of the year, I finally beat Persona 5 The Royal. I played it on Nintendo Switch, I got it for Christmas, and I slowly grinded it out. Actually, I wouldn't say slowly, I played a couple hours a day at least, until I finished it. It didn't matter, it was my first semester of college, I beat that game became my life. This was the first RPG I would say I fell in love with. It was also the first game I played in a long while where I felt like I was centering my day around playing it. There's just way too much to put into words, but from the art style, the sleek combat, the character interactions and story beats, and a fantastic soundtrack combined to make one of the craziest games I have ever played. This game made me enjoy turn-based combat, and that says a lot. It's so heavily stylized and flashy. It runs much deeper than just selecting a move. But what is the enemy weak to? Are you going to be able to chain this? Will you take into consideration the chance that you might be able to get a technical attack depending on the status ailment you afflicted? But even if it's rinse and repeat, it's oddly weird because normally you rinse and repeat the same kind of combat, I get bored. But I think it's because of how flashy and fun and stylized all of it is that it makes it really, really enjoyable to keep playing. I get shivers thinking of the last section of this game. It honestly is that insane. The story itself is something that is much more of a background element that will rear its head, and I think that is something that is super cool. I mean, the base story of Persona 5 is like alright. It's nothing like freak out about. It's more about the moment-to-moment character interactions until the final section of the game, which I'm not gonna spoil, but like, dang, they went off at the character writing there. Just the concept of having a separate world that represents the people's like motives and love and interests creates a ton of different ideas that is just capitalized on. I love the confidants you forge with the different people and how they directly influence how you'll do in battle. Forming confidants, or social links as it's referred to in the other games, will allow you not just to like grow character interactions, but will also allow you to gain new abilities in or outside of battling. These help link the two forms of gameplay into something really nice. Each will have some sort of interesting story tied with it. Not all of them are fantastic, but a lot of them are really good and make you want to stay engaged. I don't want to say much else as not to spoil it, but please experience this game. It truly is something special. Also, won't be the last to hear of this series on this list. I went on a bit of a Sega kick this year. I apologize. So at the end of January, I fired up Tunic, a cute little mix between a Zelda adventure and a Dark Souls-like combat and checkpoint system. I wanted to play something a bit closer to home, and didn't expect much. I was so wrong. I was so blown away by this game. I was simply in awe. And they have the craziest puzzle in any game ever. I am not joking. You know, it's just your typical adventure game. You walk around, you're this cute little fox, and you're exploring the world. You can travel to different areas, you gather different abilities, but you start to notice something as you go along. You notice the different elements, the different inscriptions on walls, and stuff like that. But you take note of it, but you don't really put it all together. Until you do. The combat was addicting, with the world exploration making me feel as if I was playing Link's Awakening again for the first time. And don't get me wrong, comparing it to Link's Awakening is huge praise. I love that game. The atmosphere is super rich, with mysteries being hidden in many different areas. Hidden pathways, shortcuts, puzzles, and chests are everywhere. It goes places I would never expect, and is by far and away deserving of any piece of recognition it gets. Man, the payoff is so good in this game. I am not gonna spoil it again, but oh my god, it is fantastic. Entering into February and coming off of two of some of my favorite games I have ever played, I decided I wanted to be punched in the face. Starting it back in December the prior year, I came back in February to wrap it up. Man, it's just I had been on a Sonic hunt after beating Adventure 1 and 2 late last year, and really loving those games, and so playing Frontiers really just made me feel kind of empty. In some ways, it's the best Sonic game I've played, and in others, it just falls very flat. Combat is very much just overcomplicated. I don't think Sonic should be needing giant tutorial menus just to explain how to do a fancy cutscene attack. The act of running around, at least, may be some of the best it's ever felt, with tricks being very satisfying to perform. When you fall off ledges, you can like flick the stick different directions, and it makes it very fun and satisfying to pull off tricks. The story, though the cutscenes are very stale, is actually prevalent and deals with actual themes and is enjoyable, which is not something you can say about Sonic Lost World or Sonic Forces. The bosses are amazing, and I'm sorry I don't have the footage for it right now, but they are definite highlights. That's where the praise ends, however, as the open world design is so lifeless, with no rhyme or reason to most of it. Cyberspace levels are very clunky to control with Sonic's imprecise moveset, and the game after the first world begins to feel like a grind to make progress. This game will do this stupid thing where you're running on a 3D section in the open world, and then it'll switch to a 2D side view, but then all of a sudden you'll be running up the rail, and it'll switch back to 3D even though you're still in the 2D section, and the game will break, and all of a sudden you'll just fall off, and you'll lose all your progress that you made in the 2D part. It's just so buggy too, and imprecise, and it feels like it's still in the testing phase almost. I don't even know what else to say about it. It just kind of made me feel empty. Like it's almost like there's not much to talk about because Sonic Frontiers feels like it needed another year in the oven. I feel like they just threw a bunch of references at the board and just hope it stick because there's not much life here in itself. I mean, I kind of like the Coco. I mean, those are kind of fun, but like, I don't know, something's just off. I enjoyed Sonic Frontiers to a degree, but would really prefer they dedicate themselves to focusing on the basics first rather than trying to do a backflip without first doing a somersault. After completing Frontiers, I continued my Sega kick by buying Rhythm Thief before the 3DS eShop shut down. If you don't know what Rhythm Thief and the Emperor's Treasure is, you're what I consider normal, and we need to fix that right now. I may be biased saying this, but Rhythm Thief I think is fantastic. Though certainly not perfect, but I don't care. I love this game. I am biased. I just don't care. This once again continues the peak game streak we had going with Tunic and Persona 5.
We are so back.
The rhythm games are all very entertaining, with many of them containing a certain degree of challenge to them, especially in the latter half. I mean, there are definitely quite a few that are, not very great, but they definitely feel like they make up for it. The game essentially plays out with you playing through a story, but the way to progress is by doing these rhythm games and solving these entertaining puzzles and exploring the world. In between, there are these lovely story sequences that are all played on these fully animated cutscenes, and there are a lot of them to see. And these aren't cheap either, they are very well done. And this is all done early on in the 3DS's life too. It's kind of amazing, honestly. The story itself is cheesy and quirky, but it's fun. And the music, I mean, it had to be good if you're going to make a rhythm game, but my god, is it fantastic. The opening theme is probably the biggest banger I have ever heard. Honestly, might be one of my favorite songs of all time. Amazing OST. It was very short, but also a very fun time, and I could definitely see myself coming back to it. However, it did only sell like 5 copies. My god. They teased a sequel at the end too, and now it's just never gonna happen. I mean, this was inevitable after Royal. Once again, another masterpiece, but in a different way than Persona 5. Persona 5 felt like it was this gigantic, climatic, stylish story, while Persona 4 is a much quieter vibe. It's fun for the smaller moments. Instead of Tokyo, you're in the small town, and so the friends you have are the people you are just stuck with. The biggest attraction is the equivalent of a Walmart. So I think that says a lot about how lively this town is, but it's because of this small town that it can get away with doing a lot of things that Persona 5 couldn't. There's a mystery going on that gives it a different atmosphere than Persona 5 would, because all the culprits are in front of your face the whole time. There aren't many people to go off of, and though it may be a little obvious about who did it, it's still really fun and has this really nice atmosphere going on. While the dungeons are much more barren than Persona 5, as it's a labyrinth approach rather than a handcrafted palace like in Royal, after getting used to it, it definitely has a certain charm to it. It still has the same basic combat as every other Persona game. It still has all the nuances of every other Persona game. It's just different. And while I don't prefer it, I can respect the approach they went with. But by far, what makes this game special is the group of characters and cast members. Oh my god, these are fantastic. The characters and social links really carry this game to some heights that even Persona 5 couldn't reach. Kanji is the GOAT. I don't know what to tell you, that is an objective fact. The soundtrack has a completely different vibe and really sparks that feeling of just lounging around with hanging out with friends. The whole game goes for this TV aesthetic, and so the soundtrack actually kind of resembles that, as it's something I would hear on a TV commercial, or maybe not necessarily a TV commercial, but maybe on the radio, Once again, I don't want to say much about this game because I don't want to spoil it, but it is another masterpiece and you all need to play it, especially for the characters. Moving on. Luigi's Mansion is a game I loved growing up. My brother, sister, and I would try to explore the mansion and try to see how far we could get without peeing our pants because we were terrified. It has this very cartoony horror charm that would scare kids but make adults laugh. It's very cool with how it's designed. And so the 3DS remake I had always wanted because it's a portable novelty.
Just the idea of playing a game you grew up with on the go is something anyone would want.
I mean, how could you not want that?
And yeah, this is Luigi's Mansion.
With multiplayer, okay, look, the multiplayer doesn't run well, like, at all, but my brother and I both got a copy of the game. We're like, we're going for this game. Like, we're going to do that. We're going to relive our childhood right now. So even the frame rate was kind of pathetic half the time. It was so much fun, man. I played as Luigi, he played as Luigi, and we just went through the whole thing. It was so good. I mean, sure, the game is only like 6 hours, but I mean, that is the kind of game you can replay infinite amount of times to go for higher ranks, and just replay it like once a year, man. It is that kind of game you play during a season. While this game obviously isn't designed for multiplayer technically, it is so much fun to run around with a second Luigi. I don't know what to tell you. And the remake is entirely faithful. They really nailed the aesthetic. I was afraid they were going to go the Dark Moon route and make it more goofy looking. No, it looks exactly like how it envisioned Luigi's Mansion on the 3DS. You would expect it to look terrible because it's on the 3DS, but since it released very late into its life, they were able to actually match the horror aesthetic on the GameCube, which I think is crazy. It does make me a little upset that we're getting Dark Moon on the Switch before we're getting the original. However, I love this and definitely would recommend it to anyone who can't play the original. I still would recommend the original over it if you have access to it, because I feel like the vibe and the atmosphere is definitely better in the original, but the remake is perfectly alright, and it's really well done, considering the hardware they were working with. So, yeah, give it a try if you can. Alright, the final Persona game I played this year, I promise. Kind of. This one I have a lot of issues with, but at the same time, it's kind of a weird situation. There are some games for me that because I have more problems with it, I tend to have a deeper attachment with it. Like if you're looking at Paper Mario Color Splash, that game has so many issues, but for some reason, it's because of those issues I find myself more drawn to it. You might be thinking, you're crazy for saying something so stupid, and you're right, but Persona 3 Fez definitely falls in that category. And this is a pretty small category, not many games fall on this list because I don't know what psychotic issue you have to even have that thought about a game, but you know, I'm me. The atmosphere is so much more depressing and gloomy when compared to the other two Persona games we have already covered, which really helps this one stand out. Tons of greens and blacks with, PS2 graphics, because I played this on a PS2, with cutscenes that are much darker and grotesque. I feel like the crappy graphics actually add to it rather than, pull it down, because I feel like if this game were put in HD, it would not hit the same, man. It would be, jarring.
Persona 4 can get away with it because most of the time it's happier with nice yellow colors everywhere. Every once in a while some fog rolls in and adds to the gloomy atmosphere, but most of the time it's happier.
Meanwhile, the crappy graphics definitely add to it. The story as a whole is much more intricate and subtle as it goes to darker places than the other games. I'm not going to spoil it, but it definitely goes to darker places. It definitely has the best plot out of the three, though it is a bit rushed in certain aspects.
The character writing is all over the place with some extremely high highs and lows of which the series has never seen since.
The game's biggest flaw, by far, is the combat. You can't control your party members in combat. You're like, what do you mean you can't control your party members? They attack for you in a game that's designed to be difficult. This caused me so much pain. I was on normal mode and getting clapped. So you really have to think about, how are the characters going to play when you put them on a certain mode or a certain aspect that they're going to follow. You really have to strategize each moveset. I got this game at the start of March along with a PS2, and I didn't finish it until the middle of May. Why? Because this game is a lot harder to get into than the other ones. The dungeons of this game is once again a labyrinth format like Persona 4, but unlike Persona 4, there's no changing of themes or music with each character. You're stuck with the same music and the same couple themes throughout the whole ride of going up this giant tower. 250 floors of this tower, might I add. Despite the lackluster combat and labyrinths with the hit or miss characters, this is still a Persona game. It has so much fun with itself despite all that. Like I mentioned before, I like this game in a different way than the other two. I generally just love 4 and 5 for the direction they took and how everything fits together. 3 I like for all of its highs and lows. We may be talking about this game later on, and I definitely have more to say on it, but we'll get back to it later. This was one of those magical scenarios where you're about to go on vacation and you pick up a game to play on the trip. On that week trip, I almost entirely beat this game. It's not even that I necessarily love this game, it's just the charm of playing a RPG on the road that hits different. Ni no Kuni, or After the White Witch, has this unique art style that is just so wonderful. The cutscenes and art was all done by Studio Ghibli, and the music was done by the legend Joe Hisaishi. These guys are legends and obviously make a lot of fantastic movies. They decided to dip their toes in, something a little different, and I love them for that. It's your pretty generic story, kid gets powers and saves the world kind of game, but it's charming with some interesting plot points. However, the combat is not good. It's like this turn-based live action combat where you have to be aware of where you're standing during it. It's just very slow and clunky most of the time, especially in the boss battles with their giant health bars. It didn't help that most of the game I was underleveled because I was avoiding the side quests because they were just very boring to me. It was very much, take this thing, move it to another point. Take this thing, move it to another point. I'm like, I don't care. But it was because of me not doing that I was underleveled in experience, and so I had to result in grinding. And even that wasn't enough to catch me up. And because of that, these boss battles took a lot longer than it probably should have. Putting all that aside, with the aid of the magic of traveling while playing it, I did enjoy Ni no Kuni. I don't think I would have finished it had I not been on vacation. However, it's because I was on vacation that I was able to see something through that I never would have before, and I think that's really, really cool. Though, I do want to note that it seems as the game progressed, the production quality seems to become lower with cutscenes becoming less frequent and shorter throughout the game, and the story feeling a bit padded. Still a pretty solid time altogether though, so would recommend if you're into that kind of game. Now, there was one other game I played throughout the summer, and oh my god. Oh my god! Woo! The most addicting and replayable game I have played ever. It's wild that for a game that was only $7 on the 3DS eShop, I have almost 100 hours in. I am this close to being able to 100% it too. I am one race away, and it won't appear for whatever I do. I bought this game way before the shop was closing, and played maybe 20 hours of it before in the prior year. But really, it took over me throughout the summer. Besides Ni no Kuni on vacation, this was essentially the only game I played for 3 months straight. What's so great about it? Solitaire and horse racing combined to create one of the most addicting games. This strategy involved is to create a horse to win is absolutely crazy. Breeding techniques, stat bonuses, how you perform in the race, what exactly you do during the race, how you race, all directly affect how great you train your horse. One of the most hype video game moments I've had was completing the hardest race in the game, King's Gate, which may be the greatest accomplishment I've had in any video game ever. It starts off with a dead, quiet crowd and goes into one of the hardest hitting final boss themes ever. To win this race, you have to literally play perfect solitaire and zone management. The tiniest slip up, and you will have zero chance at winning. I am not exaggerating. And if you lose, you don't get to retry. No, you have to race an entirely new horse and have it win enough races to become successful enough to even be allowed to enter the race again. That doesn't even mention the fact that the horse you bring may have stats that aren't even close to being good enough to have a chance at winning. So to say the least, don't mess up. After getting to this point with my 37th horse, I don't remember the exact number, and 5 other failed attempts, I began my race. Headphones in and a headache quickly forming as I was on a plane. I scored perfect after perfect, maintained perfect position, didn't lose any stamina, and made sure to grab the 2 blue boost. I entered the home stretch with a score of 100, spanking my horse constantly with all my stamina being used up and my boost used. I watched second place pass me as I was about to cross the line, sweating. When I used my last heart, spanked my horse, and we won by 0.02 seconds. I popped off in my seat and quickly realized we were airborne. I cannot recommend this game enough, even if it is just something you play for a little, except the eShop no longer exists. There is a crappy mobile version with rough 3D models and missing elements, but since it is the only way to play it without emulation, go for it, I guess. Also, it's on Apple Arcade, so that says a lot by itself. Come end of August, school was about to start back up, and I had started the next Sonic game on my list to beat. This one I found to be better than Frontiers, despite the Werehog sections. The game is different than other Sonic games as it bases its locations off of real-life places. While Sonic Adventure kinda did this goes all the way with it. While this can be hit or miss having Sonic be in a human world, it did allow for some interesting ideas. A globe-trotting adventure of 2 different gameplay styles when it was day or night allowed for a great variety of settings and music. This has probably the best Sonic soundtrack of any of the games. Except for maybe Mania, I would say that competes with it a bit, but it's fantastic. The Tokyo Philharmonic Orchestra did the entire soundtrack. All of it. What? While the day sections of gameplay were honestly fantastic and may be the best the series has ever seen, the night stages, they were a slugfest. I feel they actually really nailed the daytime gameplay here for Sonic, as it felt like a cyberspace level constructed organically and with controls that weren't overcomplicated, so it was a crying shame to have a completely separate gameplay style attached. And these night stages take 2 to 3 times as long as any of the day segments, so you'll be playing more at night than day, unfortunately. They are very slow with hordes of enemies that only appear to stop progress. It's very unfortunate. The hub world elements as well felt very unnecessary. I get it's a world adventure with globe-trotting elements, but it's only made it more confusing where to go sometimes with multiple hubs. In the end, Sonic Unleashed is a game of 2 halves, where one half may be the peak of the franchise and the other half is something unnecessarily added to pad the game's length. Man, Sonic just can't get it. I got this one on a whim as a joke and was kind of surprised that I actually ended up liking it. Trombone Champ, obviously, it's nothing amazing, but it's just a fun, silly little rhythm game that I found like a good amount of enjoyment out of. I beat the final boss song and all the songs that it had at the time I was playing it, getting at bare minimum a B rank on each, I think. I had a lot of fun trying to learn these songs, even though it sounded terrible, but there was a charm to them, you know? Even if it sounded terrible, at the same time, it kind of sounded good because it felt like you could make it sound decent, even though there were trombones blaring. It was fun, you know? I felt like I was fighting my Joy-Cons the entire time because they were constantly having to be recensored. But, you know, that's kind of the fun of Trombone Champ having to fight against the controls. Why not? It was a fun time waster and was really the only thing I played during September, as I was just too busy with projects and school to do much else. That was until... I specifically made time for this one. I told myself I do not care if I have work, I am going to play this. I am making sure I have time. I am not going to call this game revolutionary by any means, but man, is it a fantastic time. It felt so good to have a new 2D Mario that had some jazz in its step, you know? Wonder managed to give me a new appreciation for how crazy it is to be a game designer, with how many ideas and expectations that had to be shattered to create this. The Wonder Flower effect is the main gimmick, and it created so many creative and fun uses for Mario to run through a level. The level design simply breaks any preconceived notions there were about Mario games before, and while still feeling like it's a Mario game, there is still a goal at the end. Somewhere to the right. Just keep running. It adds fun new animations and inspired level themes with dialogue that's cutesy and not run-of-the-mill. Well, maybe the dialogue is a little bit run-of-the-mill, but still, they actually tried here to add some flavor. Now, not everything is perfect. The bosses are probably a downgrade from even the new Super series, lacking much variety. Some of the stage types, such as the break time or search park levels, feel half-baked or kind of annoying, but besides those gripes, Wonder is excellent and deserves all the praise it's been getting. I can see myself replaying this a lot in the future, just because of all the fun tech and ideas that are just crammed into here that I probably haven't even seen fully. Ah yes, the Booster Course Pass. Controversy in a nutshell.
I've been playing this with each wave release, and it finally wrapped up in November.
Look, for starters, I will say the pass is worth it. Like, $25 for some of the best courses in the franchise, but like, man, at the same time, the effort was so weak here. Like, these courses look passable at best most of the time, and then there are even some times where they look downright bad, even sometimes where they look gorgeous. The quality is just all over the place, but not just the visuals, but the course design as well. Sometimes they would faithfully bring back a track to its detriment, sometimes they would alter a track to make it even worse, but then sometimes they wouldn't change a thing, and it would be excellent. Look, I get these tracks were asset flipped from the mobile game as well as the designs of these tracks, but like, come on. If something obviously has been simplified for a mobile game, make the effort to make it at least slightly less simple for the audience you're giving it to. At the very least, with each wave it got progressively better, with Wave 6 having some courses that looked on par with the original Mario Kart 8 even. One thing I will say that stayed consistent no matter what was the amazing soundtrack. Not counting crossover games like Super Smash Bros., I think Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with the Booster Course Pass could just be nominated for one of the best soundtracks for any video game of all time. Like, Jesus Christ, man, it's crazy the amount of effort that was put into this. Anyways, really fun game. I just want a new engine Mario Kart now. I can only stick with this for so long, but definitely worth it. I had fun with it, and you should too. So, there you go. Welp. While making my video on the original Persona 3 a while back, the remake for it was announced at the same time, which made me laugh because the script I had written for that video was essentially pointing out how a remake could potentially make Persona 3 the best Persona game. It has crazy potential with its plot and characters. It just felt like a lot of its elements weren't as thought out or were rushed simply because it was really the first game of its style to try out the whole social link kind of thing the way it did. As a result, with the remake coming out in February, I decided to prepare myself, even though none of the new content for the portable version would be making it over.
I wanted to have a complete veteran's perspective going into it.
And so I played through Portable, and 45 hours later, woo. Portable is both superior and inferior to the Fez release, in that it adds new content and quality of life features at the cost of removing stuff, such as walking around with a visual novel aesthetic, and cutscenes with images and dialogue. Pretty much anything to make it work on a portable system back in 2009. So while for a first time playthrough of Persona 3, the Fez version makes more sense so you'll get full context of the story, the portable version ain't half bad if you're already in the know-how of what's going on, especially since there's a new female route. Yes, you can play the entire game as a female now, adding new social links for her specifically, as well as everything that would have changed with being a female in the social situations you were in before as a male. Whew! It's really just kind of funny how differently you are treated, as a female compared to a male. In the portable version, the combat is now made 10 times easier, just due to the fact you can control your party members now. Thank God. Now the difficulty feels just right, rather than, outright unfair. There are other smaller changes as well, but pretty much it's a trade-off to play portable versus Fez. I'd recommend playing Fez and then the female route, but I could see people who don't want 100 different unfair deaths pick portable first, which I would completely understand. Come late November, I see a Cyber Monday deal for Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe. If you don't know, I'm a huge Kirby fan, and whenever I get the chance, I'm always down for Kirby. You know what I mean, Kirby fans. I'm not a huge sucker for difficulty in games I play, and so Kirby has always been right up my alley for the exploration aspect of it. It's not like any of the games are mind-blowingly difficult to find stuff, but it's always a good time to look around and try and figure out what you're looking for. The different items and secret rooms, and it's so much fun to look for fun copy abilities and stuff like that. Also, just Kirby's adorable and everything around it's adorable. I played a bit of the original Return to Dreamland when it came out, but never got super into it. I don't know, I think it was just kind of like how it was designed and how generic it looked at the time. I just want to point out, this isn't a silly remaster. HAL really went in and redid everything and made it look gorgeous. Better than even Star Allies, I would say. They put a nice black border around everything, made everything really shiny. The backgrounds are gorgeous, fun menus now. Seriously, they really went in and did everything again. I mean, there's not a ton else I want to say about this except it's a great Kirby game. I 100%ed the story and dabbled in the other modes. It is a complete package with the 2 new modes being a mini-campaign for Magolor and a fun minigame collection. I mean, the minigame collection I had some fun messing around with. And Magolor, I'll probably finish that eventually. It's pretty short, I hear, but I hear it's a really fun time, so I hope everybody gives this one a try. Kirby always needs more fans, so. Transport yourself back to May. At midnight, the night Tears of the Kingdom launches. I found myself running around on some sky islands for an hour or two before heading to bed. I played a good 30 hours that week, but really just kind of wandering about, completing only like one of the main dungeons, being the Wind Dungeon. After beating Colgera, I traveled back to the center of the map and stopped playing. It was strange. I loved the game, but I didn't feel hooked at all. At the time, my pocket card Jockey craze had started, and so for the rest of the summer and into my first semester, I didn't touch Tears of the Kingdom. It felt too derivative of Breath of the Wild, while at the same time feeling wholly different. I couldn't decide if I was excited to play it or annoyed, so I just didn't play it. Now we're at the start of December, I just wrapped up Kirby, and my exams for this semester are already done. I begrudgingly decided to boot back up Tears of the Kingdom, and from a couple hours of just forcing myself to play the game, I was hooked. I don't really know what it was that grabbed me. I think it was just me realizing what Tears of the Kingdom was, and how it was just more than just an expansion to Breath of the Wild. I started getting into more of the story elements and the lore behind the world, and things began to click. Tears of the Kingdom is a fantastic game because Breath of the Wild is a fantastic game. It takes Breath of the Wild and breaks expectations not necessarily in any gigantic manner, but in smaller, more subtle ways. Sure, there's still a ton of shrines scattered across the land, but they allow for a lot more freedom in how a puzzle is solved due to the nature of the runes you have now. I could definitely see complaints being had with, having more freedom in puzzles, because some people just want one set solution to a puzzle, so they can figure out what the developer intended. And I can definitely get behind that, but I can also get behind this other style of puzzle solving, as you get to figure out what works for you. They're both different ways and different philosophies of solving a puzzle, and I really do enjoy both of those. Sure, you still visit the same 4 areas that you would have in Breath of the Wild, but there is a lot more going on at each than meets the eye. You begin to realize the world is filled with much more than just Koroks, but side quests that are much more fulfilling than anything Breath of the Wild had. Areas from Breath of the Wild have changed in drastic ways, or more subtle ways, making us surprised that every area you think you know, you don't know anymore necessarily. The game isn't necessarily perfect, but Breath of the Wild wasn't either, and that's one of my favorite games of all time. I won't say much more, but Tears of the Kingdom is simply fantastic, and only got better the farther into the game I got, which was crazy. This is a smaller one, but Astra's Playroom. I'm throwing it on here because, why not? I loved it. I don't care what you think. It only took like 3 hours to 100%, but I just absolutely adore this game. If this were a full-on 15-hour 3D platformer, it may be one of the best games ever made. However, it said it will be relegated to just being an amazing tech demo, because this made me a believer in the DualSense controller. I'm not a big PlayStation guy, but even I could tell the heart and soul they poured into referencing the past in this. And the game doesn't just reference the past, they give Astrobot a lot of character and love in this game, and I can really get behind that. If they really do make a full-on Astrobot game that, is in VR, I can really see the charm that could flow into it. And maybe it would reference more PlayStation stuff, but they can also see it just being its own thing. Everything is just so smooth and tight and Again, while this game is short, I highly recommend anybody with a PS5 to try it out. While it definitely won't sell you on a console,
It definitely gave me a great time the first time I booted up the PS5.
the final game on this list, our final nominee, Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky, the final game of the year. Imagine you're a senior in high school and you have a friend who is just absolutely obsessed with this one Pokemon game. I'd already completed the first one and liked it, but it was very repetitive. But he was really hyping up Explorers. I caved in and got on the Wii U eShop after making a deal with him that he would get Pocket Card Jockey as well. A soul for a soul, am I right? I'd play a couple minutes here and there, but largely it sat there untouched for months and months. I graduated high school, worked through the summer, began my first semester at college, and still it sat dust growing. Winter break came and went. Second semester began and ended. I told him I would beat it over the summer, but when I powered it back on, I found myself forgetting the previous 5 hours I'd already put in, and therefore delaying touching it even longer. Eventually, I decided that I'd be more likely to play it if I had easier access to it. So after emulating it, I played maybe 4 hours worth towards the end of the summer and decided I would play it throughout the school year. That did not happen. August, September, then October, and mid-November arrived. I found myself bored waiting for a club meeting when I realized I forgot I had it already downloaded. You get into this rhythm in the semester and you forget about a lot of outside factors. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon was definitely a part of that. I went back to my save file, opened it back up, and realized it was gone. Must have deleted it by accident. No matter though, so for the third time, I restarted Explorers of the Sky. Got my starter Torchic and my partner Famp, and we set out. During that week, I played 16 to 17 hours worth of Mystery Dungeon, getting myself close to the end. I had made some save states prior, but stopped making them as I was on the grind to finish the game at that point. That was my downfall. At one point while I was playing, I went to readjust how I was sitting when my computer started to slide off my lap. I went to readjust when my finger accidentally slipped and hit one of the shortcut keys to load a save state. It saved over where I was, meaning I had just lost a lot of progress. But how much progress did I really lose? Well, apparently the last save state I had made was at the 6-hour point. Oh, I saved over my data. I lost 10 hours of progress. I was mentally crushed. I was going to surprise my friend when I met up with him in a couple days that I had beat the game. We were going to do the final boss together. But nope. So, did I give up? Well, I ended up calling this Mystery Dungeon guru, and he came up with an idea that I thought was psychotic. He would speedrun starting from the save state I had left since he had played the game quite a bit, and get me back to where I was reset. I would then finish it out from there. And so, the Ben Got Reset % speedrun was born. If you want to check out how that went, the link to his channel is in the description, where I watch him speedrun and give some very insightful commentary. Anyways, after some crazy moments across 2 separate days and 5 hours of total grinding, I was finally back at the point I was reset at. Except now underleveled quite a bit from where I was originally at since he had speedrun his way there. But still, with a healthy save state made, I began to approach the finale. I climbed the tower and went to fight Dialga, where I finally wound up completing the game. Nearly 2 years later. No, I'm not going to say Mystery Dungeon is some masterpiece because it's not. In fact, it annoys me a lot. However, this game means more to me than just being a Mystery Dungeon game. It's a story of overcoming obstacle after obstacle just to complete some stupid monster game. I did like the game, especially with the legendary soundtrack behind it. There's something about a Pokemon story that is just nice and calming as well. It really just set the tone for how crazy 2023 really was. And so there are all the nominees I played throughout the year. As you could tell, I played quite a bit, but at the same time, not necessarily a lot of them that came out in 2023. I definitely played some 2023 stuff, but not a ton of it was in 2023. Anyways, you might have seen the graphic that I displayed throughout the video. Here are the nominees for the Game of the Year for the 2023 games. Trombone Champ, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass, Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And the winner goes to... Zelda! Is that a surprise? Wonder was excellent, but 2D Mario has never been my favorite, though I do love Mario Maker. Tears of the Kingdom just opened my eyes to the smaller things and made me appreciate everything surrounding the open world so much more than when I had played Breath of the Wild. Any game I play this year is by default a nominee for the overall Game of the Year. I'll cut it down to 6 nominees to make this a tad simpler. The nominees go: Persona 5 The Royal, Tunic, Persona 4 Golden, Rhythm Thief and the Emperor's Treasure, Pocket Card Jockey, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. You know it's crazy when the Mario fanatic doesn't have Wonder even on the list. All of these games sparked something in me this year. Each one has some sort of story with it tied up in its own unique bow. Normally, Game of the Year is much easier to decide, but I decided to play somehow some of the best games I've ever played all this year. However, there is one game specifically that set a trend and changed my perspective on gaming entirely. That honor goes to Persona 5 The Royal. A year later from when I started it, I've begun to replay it to bide my time before the Persona 3 remake comes out. And it is so much fun and emotional and dramatic and just flashy. It really did have a fantastic story, lovable moments and characters and exploration that just makes me want to replay it over and over. I cannot recommend it enough. Well, anyways, this year definitely shook up my top favorite games quite a bit. That was my story, and I would like if you could share some of your favorite stories from this year as well. Just any gaming memories you have this year or something funny that came along with it. Anyways, see ya!